There was no collusion with Russia. There was a complete and total exoneration.
The Attorney General's comments make it clear that Congress must step in to get the truth.
I hope this is something that the entire American public can read.
I don't care what side of the aisle you are, Republican, Democrat, Green Party, this is a good day for America.
It is Monday, March 25th, and this is a Fox News alert for you. No collusion and no obstruction of justice. Attorney General William Barr stunning Congress with his summary of the Mueller report. Will this be enough for Democrats to stop waging war on the president? And how will it impact the 2020 race? We have live team coverage and some analysis for you. Coming up, Fox and Friends First starts right now. Washington, D.C., where the lights are on. It was a busy one over the weekend. Wow, lots of things happening on Capitol Hill. We have it all covered for you. Good morning. You're watching Fox and Friends First on this Monday morning. I'm Heather Childers. Thank you so much, as always, for starting your day and your week with us. Let's get right to that Fox News alert for you, though. The Trump administration declaring victory after the Mueller report finds no collusion with Russia. But Democrats, as many would imagine, are already pushing back, saying that the special counsel's report does not fully exonerate the president. Doug Luzader is live in Washington for us, where the fight is just beginning, possibly. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning. The president learned about the results of the report while he was in Florida this weekend. This was his reaction as he headed back here to Washington.
There was no collusion with Russia. There was no obstruction. It was a complete and total exoneration. It's a shame that our country had to go through this. To be honest, it's a shame that your president has had to go through this. This was an illegal takedown that failed. And hopefully somebody's going to be looking at the other side.
Now, there are two big takeaways here, at least according to the summation of the Mueller report that the Attorney General put together. First, and on this point, the summary is pretty emphatic. The special counsel's investigation did not find the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Now, on the question as to whether the president obstructed justice, the Mueller report apparently presents arguments on both sides, but doesn't make a firm determination. The special counsel, therefore, did not draw a conclusion one way or the other as to whether the examined conduct constituted obstruction. And Democrats are really focusing on that point, especially after Attorney General William Barr determined that there was not enough evidence to make an obstruction case.
This report does not amount to a so-called total exoneration. The special counsel spent 22 months uncovering evidence of obstruction and other misconduct. Attorney General Barr made a decision about that evidence in under 48 hours. His conclusions raise more questions than the answer.
Now, a number of Democrats are calling for the full report to be released. It looks like that's going to happen. I mean, there will obviously be some redactions, but it looks like that will eventually happen. Meantime, some Democrats are calling for Attorney General William Barr to testify here on Capitol Hill. Heather.
All right. Thank you very much, Doug. Lots more to come on this. Thank you. Well, the Trump administration celebrating the Mueller report's findings. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders tweeting, a great day for America and for President Trump. After 2 years of wild anti-Trump hysteria, the president and his millions of supporters have been completely vindicated. Well, Counselor Kellyanne Conway tweeting, today you won the 2016 election all over again and got a gift for the 2020 election. They'll never get you because they'll never get you. And the Trump campaign is using the report to call out Democrats in a brand new campaign ad. Look.
I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight.
We saw strong evidence of collusion.
Well, we know there was collusion with people in the campaign.
Democrats holding out hope of finding the president guilty of obstruction. In a joint statement, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer claiming Attorney General William Barr is not a neutral observer. and they claim that his summary raises as many questions as it answers. The Democratic leader saying, quote, the fact that Special Counsel Mueller's report does not exonerate the president on a charge as serious as obstruction of justice demonstrates how urgent it is that the full report and underlying documentation be made public without any further delay. Well, some say the outcome of special counsel investigation, or the special counsel's investigation, begs the question, why was it even started in the first place? Todd Pyro is here to break down the timeline of the Russia probe. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning to you, Heather. So just how did we get here? Here are some of the key dates in a saga filled with them. And again, these are just the highlights. There are a lot more we could have put in here. Starting in 2017, January 10th, BuzzFeed publishes the unverified and since discredited Russian dossier alleging that Russia has compromising information on President Trump. March 4th, President Trump asserts that Trump Tower was wiretapped before Election Day by the Obama administration. May 17th, Rod Rosenstein announces Robert Mueller's appointment as special counsel on Russian election interference, a move that comes almost immediately after Trump fires James Comey as FBI director. June 14th, the Washington Post reports that Mueller is investigating Trump for possible obstruction of justice after Comey testified that the president asked him. First indictment results in 12 counts against Paul Manafort, the former Trump campaign chair, including conspiracy, tax fraud, and money laundering. December 1, Flynn pleads guilty to lying and agrees to cooperate. Now to 2018, February 16th, Mueller indicts 13 Russians and 3 Russian entities on charges of interfering in the 2016 election. April 9th, the feds raid the apartment, hotel, and office of Michael Cohen, Trump's personal lawyer. July 13th, Mueller indicts 12 Russians in the 2016 DNC hack, accusing them of conspiring to interfere in the presidential race. September 7th, George Papadopoulos sentenced to 14 days in prison. September 14th, Manafort pleads guilty and agrees to cooperate. November 20th, Trump submits written answers to Mueller, avoiding an in-person sit-down. Then, this year, January 25th, Roger Stone, an informal advisor to Trump's presidential campaign, is indicted on charges of obstruction, false statements, and witness tampering. And then on Friday, Heather, as we know, Mueller delivers his report to the DOJ, ending the investigation.
So then the next thing on the timeline, when will we get a copy of the full report, if and when?
And who knows? You know, like I made this point yesterday on Twitter. Not a lot of lawyers are going to be able to go through 675 pages and make sure the confidential stuff is all removed over the course of 48 hours. You can summarize it like Barr did, but to go through and make sure nothing that is confidential or could jeopardize our country's security is released, that takes time.
Yeah, or they just block out entire pages, which we've seen them do before. Thank you so much, Todd.
No problem.
Well, so let's bring in constitutional law attorney and former prosecutor Jenna Ellis now to join us to talk a little bit more about the findings and Barr's summary. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Heather. Always great to see you.
So what are your initial thoughts as you watched all of this unfold yesterday?
Yeah, well, this is an absolute and complete total vindication for the president. And regardless of what the leftist mainstream media is reporting, the obstruction of justice question is completely closed. What you're not seeing reported is the full sentence and the full scope of that page to Barr's letter. Because remember, it says that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish obstruction of justice. What most mainstream media outlets are reporting is simply cutting off that sentence to say the special counsel's investigation was not sufficient. So now they're calling for even more investigation, where Mueller has, the almost 3,000 subpoenas, 500 witnesses, 22 months. This was fully sufficient. And so the obstruction of justice question absolutely is closed. And American people, Heather, regardless of whether you're an R or a D, should be celebrating the fact that our president, regardless of who voted for Donald Trump and who didn't, he is our president, and he was completely honorable throughout his campaign and throughout his tenure in the White House.
But
that's
what a
the
lot of
line.
Democrats are saying now, and some expected this to happen in terms of Barr, they're saying, this summary was written by Barr and Rosenstein, who were both appointed by President Trump. Here's what Pelosi and Schumer had to say, their statement on it. Given Mr. Barr's public record of bias against the special counsel's inquiry, he's not a neutral observer and is not in a position to make objective determinations about the report. And then add to that, they're saying that he and Rosenstein were both appointed by President Trump. So what about that?
Well, that's just simply not factually accurate. And the Attorney General has to be an unbiased party. And let's remember, these are the same Democrats who were claiming that Loretta Lynch as well as Eric Holder were unbiased observers. So they can't claim that one Attorney General is and another Attorney General isn't just based on the party of the president that appointed them. So that's one thing. But then second, let's remember that Barr has a significant history here. Mm-hmm. He was part of the Bush administration. He is not new to the ballgame, but every time that a prosecutor looks at the evidence, it's not just their opinion about it. They have to look and make a legal conclusion and determination. That's what Barr did, and his summary was thorough. It was incredibly transparent, and it also just summarized what is going to be coming out later in the report. So if there are discrepancies, we, the American public, will know that, so he's going to be careful.
And let's talk about that. What could be coming up? A lot of folks now questioning President Obama's role in this, Hillary Clinton's role in this. Listen to this exchange, which was back in January. Listen to this.
Do you promise me as Attorney General, if you get this job, to look in to see what happened in 2016?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
How do these statements sit with you?
I was shocked when I saw them.
So should the Obama administration, should Hillary Clinton now both be investigated in terms of what led up to this investigation of the president to begin with?
Absolutely. And, a lot of us who are conservatives and who understand that the rule of law and equal protection of the law and equal justice under the law means that everyone who is potentially involved should be investigated. We've been calling for an investigation of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and anyone else on the Democratic side since the very beginning. This has been a one-sided investigation, and the president was absolutely right in his remarks yesterday. So, of course, the American public need to know who else was responsible for this. Was there any collusion on the part of the Democrats? Mm-hmm. Of course that needs to be investigated.
Yeah, that's why a lot of folks, Republicans, there really doesn't seem to be a lot of controversy. They do agree as well that the Mueller report should be released, but they're also calling for all of the material leading up to this investigation, that to be released as well. So we'll see what happens. Jenna Ellis, thank you so much for joining us. Busy day.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks. Well, Americans across the country are weighing in on the Mueller report. Hashtag release the full report is one of the top trending topics on Twitter. One person writing, looks to me like we all agree. Barr, you might want to look at this hashtag, release the full report. Another tweets, surely it will get leaked sooner than later, so you might as well hashtag release the full report. So what do you think? Should the report be made public? Why or why not? Leave us a comment on our Fox and Friends First Facebook page, and we'll share them a little bit later. Well, the time now is about 15 minutes after the top of the hour. No collusion. None. Did Democrats just hand the president a 2020 win? Our next guest, a Republican strategist, says it's full steam ahead for the president's agenda.
We have a lot of questions that are not answered in this letter.
They don't have a single full sentence quoting the Mueller report at all.
With the left-leaning media melting down why they just can't come to terms with the no collusion headline.
The evidence is pretty clear that there was collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians.
I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight.
We saw strong evidence of collusion.
Well, we know there was collusion with people in the campaign.
Well, President Trump's re-election campaign already pouncing on Robert Mueller's report, releasing that video, slamming Democrats for their claims about collusion. So are they helping his bid for re-election? Here to discuss is GOP strategist Chris Nywame. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Good with you, Heather.
So, as with everyone, I just want to begin with your overall thoughts about what transpired yesterday.
Well, I don't know if we need mayonnaise or mustard on the nothing burger. I think either will do. There was nothing there. The Democrats don't have a backup plan. This is, it's good news to obviously hear this in general, but they just don't have a plan for the president. He's been very successful. He has a strong record, and so now they're kind of left scratching their heads.
Yeah, it seems like their plan is to still continue with additional investigations, though. Is that a wise move?
They're desperate. They have to do that. They want to dog him down. That's what they're going to try to do to the House. But I think that the president's going to stick to the agenda, be consistent. And the Democrats really have to try to figure out something new here.
Yeah, we have this one portion that we wanted to pull out from the Attorney General's letter summarizing the Mueller investigation yesterday. He said the special counsel did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in these efforts. And it goes on to say, despite multiple offers from Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign.
Well, I think foreign powers are always trying to interfere. We've seen that with China. It's what they do. They continue to be consistent about that. But there hasn't been, I mean, there was no collusion between Democrats and middle-class voters. And that's really what happened. It's an electoral problem, and they're going to continue to struggle with that. And that's exactly what's happening right now.
So do you think that this will obviously benefit the president moving forward?
I do. His narrative has been consistent, and to be fair, the president was opposed by everyone, the media establishment, the Democrats, Republicans, and he was able to be successful. I think it's his connection with voters and his ability to communicate directly to them without the media establishment.
And in terms of whether Democrats accept these conclusions, and if the report, is made public, would it be wise for them to do so? Will it harm them if they decide they're not going to accept this?
Not necessarily, but it's just next steps. I mean, they've really been consistent about trying to push this up and draw attention to it, but there's just not anything there. So, I mean, they should try to focus on an agenda that moves them back to the center, because Democrats I know that are in the center don't want the party going as far left as they have, and that's the real struggle they have now. They have a political problem.
At this point, they're already trying to dismiss the summary by the Attorney General, saying that both, as we just mentioned, both he and Rosenstein were appointed by President Trump. Now they have this opportunity. They're saying, let's just release the report, and they're trying to act like that's a partisan issue as well, where it doesn't really appear to be. Do you think that the report should be released?
Not necessarily. No, I mean, I don't think there's not much there. I mean, I think that's how under the Obama administration we saw the same thing with investigations and partisanship. There's always going to be politics in government to a certain extent, but I don't think it's necessary, and I think we're ready to move on from this.
All right, we will see if anyone agrees with you. Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate it. All right, and we will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Fox and Friends. First, some headlines for you now. A rocket attack forcing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to cut his U.S. trip short. Netanyahu vowing to retaliate against the strike that destroyed a home and wounded 7 people north of Tel Aviv. The rocket came from the Gaza Strip, but so far no group has claimed responsibility. Netanyahu is in D.C. today for a meeting with President Trump, where the president will formally recognize Israeli control over the Golan Heights. Well, Boeing taking steps towards getting the 737 MAX 8 back in the air. Planes were grounded, as you'll recall, all around the world in the wake of 2 deadly crashes. 3 American pilots now testing software changes on flight simulators following a New York Times report claiming that Boeing rushed engineers to design the planes at twice the normal pace. Well, the issue is forcing American Airlines to cancel about 90 flights a day through April 24th. And this was really remarkable. Viking Cruise Line working to send passengers home after a near disaster at sea. The ship reaching port in Norway following hours of chaos when its engines failed during a storm. Watch. Unreal. Nearly 500 passengers airlifted off that cruise ship before the ship restarted its engines. At least 20 passengers were injured in all that. And the first wave of defendants accused in a massive national college admissions scandal will face a judge today. At least 12 of the 50 people charged are expected in a Boston courtroom for paying and accepting bribes worth millions of dollars. Now, 7 of the 9 colleges, or the college coaches involved, will be present, including fired legendary USC water polo coach Jovan Vavitch. So we'll stay on top of that. Well, to March Madness, though, how about this? Some good news. Oregon heading to the Sweet 16 after blowing out UC Irvine. The Ducks besting the Anteaters 73-54. And then top-seeded Duke surviving a scare from Central Florida in the final seconds.
That are not answered in this letter.
They don't have a single full sentence quoting the Mueller report at all.
So what will it take for them to come to terms with the no collusion headline? And why did it all begin in the first place? President Trump now calling for the investigators to be investigated. Emily Compagno, a former federal attorney, joins us live to weigh in. Democrats zeroing in on the statement in the Attorney General's summary that the special counsel's report didn't exonerate President Trump of obstruction of justice. Now, he left that decision to the Attorney General. His legal team in the Justice Department cleared the president on that point. So let's bring in National Security Attorney Brad Moss, former Justice Department counsel Jamil Jaffer, and former independent counsel Saul Weisenberg. Great to have all of you with us.
Good evening, Shannon.
All right, Saul, I'll start with you. Jerry Nadler, who's the congressman, the chair now of the House Judiciary Committee, really is honing in on that point and saying Barr's going to have to come to the Hill. We want to have a discussion of how it took 2 years for the special counsel to say he couldn't decide that point, and yet less than 2 days for the Attorney General to conclude the president's not guilty of obstruction. Where do you think that goes?
Well, he'll have to go to the Hill, and he'll answer the questions that he wants to answer. That's part of the democratic process. I don't think it's really going to go anywhere. There are no secrets about what Bob Barr thinks about obstruction based on the idea of President Trump firing Jim Comey. He thought it was ridiculous. I thought it was ridiculous. And I think they got the information and consulted, and they've probably been talking about it for a lot longer than 2 days. And there wasn't any real witness tampering. It's very clear that Barr thinks you have to have real witness tampering, that kind of activity, something that goes to the evidence, tampering with evidence. And you didn't have that here, so I don't think anything's going to come of it. I'm actually not surprised that Mueller framed it that way, knowing how Barr feels about obstruction, but I'm sure Mueller's quite upset about some of the things that were done by the president's team, but I just think it's not going to go anywhere.
All right, I want to play something from Professor Alan Dershowitz. I spoke with him earlier today about this issue of the special counsel leaving this kind of on the table for the Attorney General to decide. Here's what he had to say about the Mueller report and the Barr assessment.
I think the Mueller report does a good job of depoliticizing, at least on the collusion, conspiracy, Russian interference, but I think it did an abysmal job on the issue of obstruction of justice. We, the American public, are entitled to a yes or no decision, not some law school essay on what arguments there are on both sides of this issue. That was a serious mistake.
Bradley, what do you make of that? He said it felt it was kind of like a cop-out, that the special counsel kind of put it out there but did not make the decision.
You know, I had no issue with it. I understand what Professor Dershowitz is saying about it. But in the end, this was a very political question more than anything else, whether or not the president's behavior, things that technically were within the scope of his authorities, whether he should have used it or not, necessarily would have been abuse of his power. That's going to be a political question, ultimately going to Congress. And the special counsel decided, you know what, I'm not going to place myself as the unelected, non-appointed bureaucrat to make that choice. I'm going to give it to the Attorney General, who was properly appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. I'm going to give him that choice. Say, here is the evidence. You decide if this is something that needs to go to Congress and needs to be considered in the context of impeachment. I myself am not going to decide on this because it's not a criminal issue so much as a political one.
Yeah, and Jamil, of course, the legal standard that you have for deciding to move forward with impeachment or prosecution of, or excuse me, indictment or prosecution of someone is a much different assessment than deciding whether you have enough to impeach someone. So it seems like Democrats, in pushing for these underlying materials and the other requests they've already made of a number of people within the president's orbit, it's a different standard for them and an easier one for them to get to. Do you think they go there?
Look, I can't imagine how they go down that road. I mean, look, the president has been very clear that he thinks the investigation was a sham. And now it's proven out that there was no collusion. And so, he's taking a victory lap right now. If the Democrats now try to come at him with impeachment, I think he's going to. I mean, it's going to be a big political mistake. It'll be like the attempt to impeachment by Republicans back in the 90s of Bill Clinton. We saw how well that went for Republican candidates. I think the Democrats have a lesson to learn there.
Yeah, so do you think that the Democrats should be worried about too much backlash with their continued push for more of these materials and their other investigations, and the threat now of subpoenas, of potentially bringing Mueller and Barr up on the Hill under a subpoena?
Who are you asking?
Saul?
Oh, sorry. Well, there's always the danger of that, but it's going to be very, very difficult for the Democrats to say no. They've got the base that they're concerned about, an enraged base. And where they're going to go is on the obstruction side, because it's very clear there's nothing there on collusion. And it's really quite striking
that we did not find, I think the actual words are, we did not find evidence of the collusion. And they even went beyond, Mueller went beyond saying of criminal collusion. He said of any collusion, and he said despite the many efforts and the overtures to people in the Trump campaign. So I think the plan all along has been to get Mueller's information on obstruction, alleged obstruction, and to turn that into an impeachment. And Mr. Attorney General Barr did something very interesting. In his letter, he said, I'm not really allowed to reveal 6E information. He's correct. He's correct. Grand jury information. He's right. It's a crime to do so. And Schumer and Schiff and Pelosi are in effect asking him to commit a crime by turning it over immediately. However, he can go to a court. Jaworski went to a court. Ken Starr went to a court. He can get a court order to allowing him to release 6E information, but his letter kind of skips over that. It assumes without saying so that he can't do that, and I don't think that's correct, so that'll be an interesting issue to watch.
Yeah, and he said consistently since his confirmation hearings as the Attorney General, regardless of what happened in the report, he'd pushed to get as much of it out as quickly as he could while respecting those legal guidelines, so we will now stand by for the rest of the story. In the meantime, Brad, Jamil, and Sol, thank you all very much.
Absolutely. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, clearing the president of collusion with Russia should be good news to all Americans. Well, not everyone in the media thinks so. All right, rather than leading with the special counsel's finding that no Americans, including the Trump campaign, colluded with Russia in its efforts to disrupt the 2016 election, many in the media today instead focused on the special counsel's decision not to fully exonerate the president on obstruction charges, instead leaving that to the Attorney General, who has cleared the president. We've got team coverage with David Spunt looking at how the 2020 candidates are responding. First, correspondent Leland Vitter monitoring the media reaction today. There's been plenty of it, Leland.
Very much so, Shannon, and a very rare thing. For a moment, there was near universal agreement among even the most skeptical cable news pundits on one point, that this does clear the president on collusion. And many didn't take much more time than I just did on that point before going on the attack.
Why did Donald Trump and why did his administration and why did everybody close to him lie about contacts that they had with Russia throughout the course of the campaign? And I guess the answer to that may just be pure basic greed. He wanted to build a tower in Moscow.
The bar is now whether things are illegal, not just whether they're inappropriate.
All right, so as it relates to obstruction, commentators and anchors called out the president for his declaration, both by tweet and before he flew back to Washington, of exoneration.
By these folks. This is, Katie, as we know, this is what Donald Trump does, over-exaggerates everything, whatever it is.
There is a very big difference between trying to get enough evidence for a criminal charge, president or not, and to start impeachment proceedings against the president for obstruction of justice.
All right, even those agreeing with the concept that this is good for the president found a possible issue.
It's good for the president to be able to cast himself as a victim. Robert Mueller, we were told, was a lunatic, hell-bent on bringing down the president at any cost with his 12 or 16 angry Democrats who were rigging this whole thing.
All right, so here's how Eric Trump responded. He tweeted, "How about a simple apology from the MSM, mainstream media, for the hell everyone has been put through for the past 2+ years," and tagged a number of media companies. He might have to wait a while for that. Of all the things said today, Shannon, from speculation on impeachment to calls for an investigation into the FBI and DOJ, an apology is one thing we never heard.
And we're not holding our breath. All right, Leland, thank you very much. 2020 Democratic candidates hoping to defeat President Trump also speaking out in force today. You heard from Democratic presidential candidate John Delaney at the top of this hour. Now, correspondent David Spunt joins us with the rest of the 2020 roundup. David?
Well, hey, Shannon, this is the letter. We've been talking about it all day. It's 4 pages long. Now that these candidates have had a few short hours to digest this Barr letter, we're hearing from more of them. The theme is the same. They're not satisfied with the letter. They want to see the entire Mueller report. Bernie Sanders was in San Francisco video in front of a crowd when the news of the letter broke.
What I know is that it is a summary of the report. Well, I don't want a summary of the report. I want the whole damn report. Because nobody, especially this president, is above the law.
Now, Pete Buttigieg, who's only launched an exploratory committee at this time, said something interesting following the conclusion letter. Listen to what he had to say.
As was said in the summary, the president's not being indicted at the moment. He's also not been exonerated at the moment. From the political perspective, I think this is further evidence that it would be a mistake for Democrats to think that the way for the Trump presidency to end is by way of investigation.
Now, the collusion argument may not hold anymore, but Democrats will continue to push that obstruction angle in the near future. Here is 2020 candidate John Delaney, who was actually just on this show at the top of the hour.
And here the president goes again when he's saying he was exonerated. What the attorney general said was he was specifically not exonerated on the obstruction charge.
With news of the Barr summary letter, Kamala Harris took to Twitter, quote, "The Mueller report needs to be made public. The underlying investigative materials should be handed over to Congress and Barr must testify. That is what transparency looks like. A short letter from Trump's hand-picked attorney general is not sufficient," end quote. And Elizabeth Warren tweeted, quote, "Congress voted 420-0 to release the full Mueller report, not a summary from his hand-picked attorney general. AG Barr, make the full report public immediately." Now, Congress did vote to make this report public, but as the attorney general noted in this letter he released today, he may not be able to release all of this, the entire report right away because of security reasons, departmental policies. That has Democrats concerned, but Shannon, I expect that we will all see these 2020 candidates on the trail over the next few days talking a little bit more, a lot more about what we found here and making that Mueller report public. That's what they want to see.
Well, and the president said just a couple of days ago, fine, do it. I want the public to see it. So I don't think there's anybody really objecting at this point other than the legal and statutory. The president nor anyone in his campaign colluded with Russia in 2016 now give him a leg up going into 2020. We have a political power panel lined up to talk about that and more. Democratic strategist Dave Brown, Republican strategist Alexandra Wilkes, and Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk. Great to have all of you.
Hey, Shannon.
Thanks for having us, Shannon. Okay, I want to read something that comes from Matt Taibbi. He's released an early chapter of his upcoming book, Hate, Inc., under this headline. It's official. Russiagate is this generation's WMD. He says for years, every pundit and Democratic poll in Washington hyped up every new Russia headline like the Watergate break-in. Nothing Trump is accused of from now on by the press will be believed by huge chunks of the population, a group that, perhaps thanks to this story, is now larger than his original base. Dave, does this 2-year investigation and now the president being exonerated on this issue of collusion just set him up perfectly for re-election?
I don't think so, for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think that this is going to change how the president is viewed by most Americans. The Mueller report and the underlying issues of Russia and whether the president sought to obstruct justice, these are things that have become very hardened partisan positions for a lot of voters. And so I don't think that the news today is going to shift those people. Where I think the president's probably going to try to go, and where certainly Democrats are going to reach the persuadable voters, is on the issues that are really going to matter when it comes to what the American people care about: healthcare, education, you name it. So no, Shannon, I don't think that this really changes the ball game much, other than to say I do think what we're quickly and already seeing is now a showdown between the executive branch and the Congress, and of course the rightful calls for the report to be released in full so that the Congress can exercise its responsibility, oversight responsibility.
And Charlie, I'm not hearing anyone tonight saying they aren't going to release the report. We've heard the president say do it. The House has voted across partisan lines to say we're going to do it. And Barr has said as quickly as I can get it to you without disclosing information I can't, it's coming.
Yeah.
It seems that way. I want to go back to something you talked a couple segments ago, which is the amount of people that the percentage of the people in America that believe that Trump colluded with a foreign power. I believe you said it was 42%. I mean, that is a stunning figure. I mean, what a disservice the media has done to this president and to the country. That 42% of voters think that he colluded with a foreign power. They're treating it as if he was guilty until proven innocent. And of course, I believe, and it's correct, that he was vindicated by, the Mueller and the Barr report on it. But I'll tell you, it is unbelievable that many people thought that without actually ever seeing the evidence of it. And thousands of articles are written by other outlets about this with no evidence, just on hearsay. And this is also important, that Attorney General Barr and the Special Prosecutor Mueller combined, they have so much experience. They wouldn't issue these kind of opinions without reviewing the documents with over 500 witnesses that were interviewed, 2,800 subpoenas that were issued. This is pretty amazing. And I just say the media, shame on them for what they did for 2 years here. And it has real damage on the narrative in this country, totally built on lies.
Well, Alex, I want to play something that, or show you something. This is a tweet from former FBI Director James Comey. Obviously, no love lost between him and the president, who let him go. But he put out a tweet tonight, and he's like out in the forest, and he's looking at these beautiful redwoods. I'm not sure what it is. It's a beautiful picture. And he says, so many questions this afternoon. Okay, that was retweeted and answered by Senator Lindsey Graham, who's now chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And he says, could not agree more. See you soon. Do you think he winds up back on Capitol Hill, along with the calls for Barr and Mueller to come too? Alex?
Oh, I absolutely think so, because this whole thing was predicated on this dossier that has now been discredited. And so you could see why the president and his allies on Capitol Hill would want to take a closer look about how this investigation was generated, even before President Trump became president. But, with respect to today, I think it's hard to see this as anything but a great day for the president and a total faceplant for Democrats. I mean, from a legal perspective, if you're a lawyer and you get told by the biggest, baddest prosecutor in town that your client is innocent of criminal charges, that's a pretty good day. And politically speaking, you have a lot of Democrats out there who in 2018 were able to run these polite campaigns that didn't mention Donald Trump and didn't mention Russia and passed everything off onto Mueller. Now you have Jerry Nadler and congressional Democrats who have the majority saying that they're going to continue the investigation. That's something that moderate Democrats in these districts are going to have to answer for, and it's not going to be a pleasant conclusion with voters.
Dave, quickly, do you think it backfires on them? Is there a possibility Democrats could push this too far? Or do you think no limit?
No, I think they have a responsibility to exercise their Article 1 duties. But look, just to go back very quickly to what Charlie said and the other guests, I mean, the reality is Mueller made a determination that beyond a reasonable doubt, that threshold, evidentiary threshold, wasn't met. But one of the reasons why we need to see this report in full is because there may be conduct that doesn't rise to that evidentiary level, but it's still very objectionable. Okay. And that's why it's critical the American people need to know what exactly happened.
And Charlie, it seems like that's exactly what the Democrats are after. Fair?
Well, yeah, that's what the Democrats are after, but make no mistake, they just want the report so they can use it as a political talking point sheet against the president. We want the report so that we can get all the facts. I think the Trump legal team should be allowed to issue a defense of the prosecution before it gets released.
We got to leave it there. Thank you all. Tonight's closing argument next.